start. I am Andrea. I am the events manager here at Growmotely and your host for today. I'm tuning in from Bucharest, Romania. I want to thank you all for reserving this time to be together. And I want to introduce our guest speaker for today. Europe-based Anja has been a slow traveling nomad for the past decade. After years in business consulting, training, and project management for a diverse variety of clients, she is now passionate about making an impact by bringing together the digital community and rural spaces with lots of opportunities. Personally, she has always thrived in a holistic, balanced lifestyle, whereas she loves both the inspiration and dynamics of cities and the tranquility she finds in nature. She believes that what we need now are solutions to live in harmony with our planet and as a society, and this is what makes her project Agaia Co-Living a hard project. Thank you, Anja, for being here. I would like to let everyone know this is an interactive session where Anja will share her experience, but I'm inviting you all to share your own by either raising your hand or interacting in the chat as you are already doing, and so happy to see that. And we will also wrap up with a Q&A session. I hope you all enjoy. I'm so happy to have you here. Just a second, so I close the music because I forgot about it. Over to you, Anja.
Yeah, thanks for the nice intro and welcome everyone. Yeah, please, like Andrea said, feel free to always interact. I don't want to talk for 1 hour. It's really about sharing experiences, and I would just like to give some inspiration and share a bit about my experience that I have from these topics. So yeah, let's get started. I would share my screen. I've prepared a few slides and also a few questions for you guys in between. So 1 second. Okay. So as I don't see the chat anymore, Andrea, as we said, feel free to interrupt or yeah, assist me on reading the chat out if there's any feedback or questions. So welcome to our masterclass. Talk and ask me anything. So you can ask me anything. And we will talk about the following topics: slow travel and opportunities for remote workers, the potential of communities and communal living, which is kind of my passion project at the moment, and how to generate a positive impact as a remote worker, which I think is also a great opportunity and something that we, well, maybe sometimes are not so aware of, because we think travel is always maybe bad for the environment, but in fact, there are some ways that you can make it, yeah, well, you can make it sustainable and you can also generate a positive impact. So I'd like to give some ideas and also ask you for your opinion on that, because I think it's quite a hot topic at the moment. Yeah, so let's, this is a little bit about myself. I think most of it Andrea has already mentioned. So I've been slow traveling, or they call it slow madding, the last about 10 years or so, or 8 years remote. And at the moment, I'm like, my main location is in Italy. I'm also based in Berlin. So I'm kind of going back and forth, and in the meantime, traveling around. But most of my time I'm in Italy because we have moved here about 1.5 years ago, my partner and I, and we have now started to develop a co-living project here, which we will also talk about a little bit later, about co-living in general. So this is what I'm doing in Italy, and at the same time working remotely and enjoying the remote working lifestyle. So I want to start by looking at some recent trends and development that we have seen that I guess you're all aware of. latest since the pandemic, we see that the remote work opportunities have been going up like this. So even before, it was already an inevitable development, but this has really brought like a massive massive race in remote work. I think a few companies are going back now, but this is generally what we always see. If there's like a trend evolving, there's always a little backlash after it goes up really high. I think from my experience, most companies are putting in place some regulations, like how many days you're allowed to work abroad, or do you have to be in a different, in the same time zone or stuff like that. But in general, my opinion is that we will see this becoming more and more. And yeah, remote work does not only mean to work from home, but also we can, now that we are free again after the pandemic, use this option to travel and to work from different places. So that's something I want to get at. So there are some statistics here to show those remote working trends are raising. And it's not just through the conditions or the companies allowing it, but it's also really employers asking for it more and more. So if people look for jobs these days, one of the main requirements they have is that they are allowed to work remotely at least part of the time. So that has been really, really growing. At the same time, another trend that I want to mention is the issue or challenge that we see on the mental health. We all know that at least during the pandemic, there was a lot of issues about taking like the care work that needed to be done in combination with working from home. But we also have the general, let's say, issue of being isolated or feeling lonely as a remote worker. And experts even say there's a loneliness epidemic going on in general. And that is obviously becoming more if you also like work remotely. So it's one of the things to be aware of that we see in general and that is happening. And then, as I said, the workforce demanding for remote jobs, but also demanding for more purpose in their jobs. So more purpose and value. We see, especially in the Gen Z, who are now entering the job market, this is one of the main factors that they look for. For us, it used to be money, I think. And then now it's more like finding your purpose, finding your true passion in what you do. And the maybe materialistic values get a bit more in the background. And obviously we have the climate crisis at the same time. So people are just more aware of how to be sustainable, what they do with their lives. And then this is basically a statistics from Italy, but I think it's it can also be translated globally. So we see demographic changes, like in the metropolitan cities, the population goes up. We see the migration to the cities, but at the same time, we also see that the post-pandemic trend is that people are looking also to move more into the nature or get in touch with nature again. So we basically have two trends: moving into city or migration to cities, and at the same time, the opposite movement of going into the nature that we can observe. So de-urbanization, they call it. So a question that I've asked myself is how does this all fit together, these different trends that we've seen? And what can we as potential remote workers, I don't know if all of you work remotely, but you might want to explore this lifestyle or opportunity. So what can we do with these trends, and what opportunities are there that they hold? So one of the points is slow traveling. I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but one definition of slow traveling is that it's an approach to travel that emphasizes connection. So it's not just going on a flight to different places to make some pictures that you post on Instagram and then leave again, but it's really about this like value, authentic connection to the place, also to the local people and to the culture. So you can say slow traveling is a bit of like living like a local for a certain period of time. And obviously you get to spend more time in one place instead of going to many different places using a lot of means of transport all the time. So it's, yeah, well, it's more sustainable for the environment, but it's also for you, for your mental health. It is more, yeah, it's a more authentic way of traveling. It's not so like rushed, let's say. So the trip is, like I said, the trip is not just for taking good pictures or like seeing as many places as possible, but it's also about education. You want to learn about the place, having an emotional impact at the place where you're at. So it's really about building a connection to the place, the people, the culture. And obviously we can travel that slowly by taking our laptop and doing some work while we travel. So by traveling slowly, except if you have a lot of vacation days during your at your job, or of course if you're freelance or you have your own business, but usually these lines between work and private life are automatically yeah, they're fading basically. So we talk about, I think it's on the, yeah, we talk about work-life integration. So for me, this comes hand in hand. We have slow traveling. At the same time, this means typically we take our laptops, we get some work done while we're traveling. So we have this work-life integration, which again comes with a downside and an upside. I think for me personally, since I'm used to this lifestyle, I see more benefits in being able to work flexible. Sometimes I work on the weekend, I get some work done, I maybe write an email in the evening, but for some people, of course, that can also be a risk of like having unclear boundaries, a risk of overwork. So yeah, that's one of the sides that I see with the slow traveling movement as well. So one of the questions, this was my perspective, something I've observed in the past couple of years. So one question that I would ask to you is, do you have any concerns when it comes to slow traveling like this, or traveling and working remotely? Do you have experience with that? And sorry.
Can share something about this. Well,
Sorry.
the thing is, I haven't been like slow traveling or nomading. I am working remotely, but I work like from home. But I did travel while working. I went to a conference last year in Dubrovnik, Croatia. I went to the seaside here in Romania in the mountains. It's interesting that we get to um, basically design our own schedule. So I think this is the opportunity. But if we go a bit deeper, for me is connecting and getting to know other cultures than yours that you wouldn't get to know if you weren't a remote worker. So while I was in office, I didn't have the opportunity, for example, to connect with someone from Africa or Latin America. So this kind of, for me personally, this kind of opportunity is really beautiful, and it opens a lot of insights. It did for me since I started to work remotely. You get to know cultures, different backgrounds. So for me, this is the opportunity is more like on the human side. And yeah, of course, it's the lifestyle that you get. If you have a flexible schedule, you get to design your work day and have a balanced life. You get to travel, and when you travel, for me, when I travel, I always get inspired. So I become more creative, more open, I have my thoughts are more clearer when I travel. When I went to Dubrovnik last year at the conference, I actually got to meet some of my colleagues, and we also like co-lived and co-worked for a week. So it was interesting experience. A lot a lot of things to say about this, but I don't want to, uh, to be me only talking. So yeah. I see here Ellen is saying, I'm currently traveling and looking for remote work to allow me to continue, especially slow travel. Sounds the best way to do. So I totally agree with slow travel, because if you travel for a week, you don't have time to immerse yourself in the culture. You don't have really time to, I don't know, taste the local food, to actually get the feel of that place. So yeah, I think the slow traveling is the way to go, and I think it also helps not us, but nature and planet in general, to have a lighter, pressure on the ecosystem. This is, yeah. Jian, I see your hand is raised.
Hi. Hi, thank
Hi.
you, Anja. Thank you, Andrea, for your inputs. I totally agree with you on the importance of taking it slow and being mindful of the impact we have over the communities. And I totally get all the benefits and opportunities we get from the human side. What is like a big question for me today is how can I keep doing that and be more conscious about sustainability in general, about how much do I fly, how much do we impact local communities, like in Lisbon, for example, which is like a huge issue that there are so many nomads and remote workers there, right? And does it mean, you were saying, Anja, and I'm sorry, I lost a moment, I got disconnected. So maybe you talked about it already, but you were saying that sometimes maybe instead of doing 3 destinations, we should only do 1 and just spend longer in each. But I still find it hard to, I feel like a lot of resources and things that we see and everything we see about the lifestyle is not promoting this, and is still encouraging, like, oh, fly more, get to the next one, you have to go to the other side of the world. Like, what's your thought process in this?
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's also one of the concerns I have, because I try to be super conscious and sustainable, but at the same time, I love to travel. So it's difficult to find a balance. And for me, I'm trying to travel smart. So usually I'm in Europe, but if I need to go take a long flight, I want to go abroad, then I travel to like South America for a while before I go back. Oh, sorry, maybe I need to get a drop. You can continue discussing. I'll be right.
There are a lot of like issues to be discussed in this direction, because if someone from, I don't know, US or Latin America wants to come in Europe, they can't stay more than 3 months. That's, the rules are made in such a way that you can't really, in all the places, stay like for 6 months. Of course, there are programs, there are a lot of like digital nomad associations. I know Montenegro has one. I know Croatia has one. I'm actually thinking about starting one in Romania, because Bulgaria has it, and a lot of like countries around Romania have it. Only Romania doesn't have it, and Romania is a really beautiful country that deserves more attention, in my opinion. Yeah, there's a lot of problems like with the visas. I think this has to we have to, at some point, by building this community, we have building these communities around remote work and anything related to remote work, we have to go a bit in depth and look at other issues, like I said, visas. Also, another thing, and in general in teams, in global teams, and I can say this from my own experience, we have to practice a very intentional and how should I say, a very intentional culture, so we can understand exactly the background that person is coming from. For example, I can give, in a meeting, if you have a Western European and an Eastern European, the Eastern European tends to be more quiet. We were very conditioned by communism, especially in Romania. So it's very hard for us, not very hard, but it's harder for us to actually share an opinion or speak up. So there are a lot of like very subtle things that we should consider in remote work as a whole. Yeah. So yeah, that's my. I have a lot of ideas on this on regarding this subject, and that's why I'm so excited people joined and we're discussing this, because yeah, it's very important. Because okay, remote work, all fun, it's great, working from everywhere, but there are a lot of aspects around remote work that should be considered. So yeah.
Yeah, I have some like topics or inspirations to talk about how we can make a sustainable and positive impact, let's say. But let's keep this travel issue in mind, because that's also still one of my concerns still, to be like, can I still take a long flight, and like how do I argument that with myself? So but let's look at some other options first of how we can actually make a positive impact and travel sustainably. So let me enlarge this, and I hope my voice is gonna be okay now. Yeah, so some benefits and opportunities I see, especially for those rural areas, that we see of these like opportunities that these trends give, is that I'm looking at the Italian area now, but again, I think it can be translated to other countries as well. So by remote work, we can also make rural parts or rural towns that have been losing population because people have moved to cities for work. We can make them attractive again. And for me, by establishing this co-living, we are not doing it in a big city, because we think there doesn't not have to be another co-living in Milano or Rome. There's already a lot of people there. So we actually go and look into those smaller towns, and there are lots of initiatives to make rural areas attractive, especially for remote workers, because they are not depending on having an office in a bigger city, right? And at the same time, we don't want to be isolated in a rural area on the countryside. We really want to integrate with the local communities, and by that stimulating local economies, for example. Yeah, I know you just mentioned in Lisbon, there's lots of nomads, probably means like rent goes up. So there's this negative side, or also the reputation of nomads coming and kind of colonializing different areas. So what we try to do with our project, but also what I try to do when I'm traveling, is maybe to go to places which are not yet so established by nomads, where I see that we can still or we can make a difference. But also you don't want to be completely isolated in those towns. So I really look for initiatives. For example, this is a picture of a town, Growmotely in northern Tuscany. And there were two local guys who have founded an initiative to bring remote workers to their town. So they organize events. There's a little like digital remote community, but it's still a very small town that is losing inhabitants. So by bringing remote workers there to work from there and to consume and interact with locals, this is actually a good way of making a positive impact if you're not in one of the larger cities, let's say. For example, that's just one of the things I found. And then obviously we have the example of Madeira as the digital nomad village. Also something I think, from my opinion, has going really well with integration of locals, and is really now a hotspot for nomads to go to. And then also looking at the tourism industry, what a form of sustainable travel that I found is to, well, first of all, more conscious, more sustainable, but also to look at maybe off seasons, because usually when we go someplace as a slow traveler or a slow mat, we stay longer, we stay maybe 2-3 weeks, even month. So we don't want to pay like the high Airbnb cost usually, but there are initiatives, for example, here in Italy, that B&Bs who are usually booked during high season, but they're more or less empty during off season, and they now offer their accommodation to especially digital nomads and remote workers for a lot less of the price. So they have understood they can't charge the same as in August, but you have the opportunity to go there if you go off season or off the beaten path, and basically pay the same as you would pay for your rent in your home country. And by this, we're using existing structures. People are already working in those in these tourism industries, so it's also benefiting them to not only work during the high season and look for other jobs during off season or low season. So that's one of the things that I think could work really well, and is kind of a new industry stream for the tourism industry. And then some practical tips. So usually when I slow travel, I look for community. I look if there are already digital hubs, like I just mentioned, the town in Growmotely, for example, or Madeira. It's not a metropolitan city, but there are other nomads. I maybe look for co-working spaces and also co-living spaces. So co-living spaces for me, especially on the countryside, but I also just stayed in Rome in a beautiful co-living, which was amazing. And there was a mix of tourists, a mix of some remote workers, some digital nomads. And typically it's run by people who know the area very well, who are locally connected. So you're not only in your bubble of remote workers, but you also get to really integrate in a good and natural way. There's also different programs and volunteering options that you can look at, like I would say organized travel programs for remote workers, something like Nomads Giving Back, for example, depending on how much availability you have to volunteer outside your job. This could be an interesting option as well, where you can make an impact. You get to support a local project. So this is typically like NGOs who are doing something great in the area, who are looking for volunteers, and they need all different type of skills. So it's not just work on the land or do something, like you don't need to be super handy. You can also help with some digital skills or whatnot. Another platform that I really like is Social B&B. It's a little startup from Germany, but they are international, I believe. So it's like Airbnb, but they only work with social projects who are also renting out accommodations to tourists. So the money they generate by renting out accommodation goes directly into building a new school somewhere, for example. So it's also for traveling. It's not just for remote work, but also if you travel generally, you can look at this platform. I really like them. And then there's some others that I know, or like co-living platforms where you can find for those opportunities. So for me, it's maybe one of the first things that I'm looking at is where do I want to go and where do I find my people, but not just in a way of being isolated in a nomad community, but also looking for communities who are already involved locally and who want to make this positive impact that I'm trying to generate. Yeah, and this is also more practical. So if I decide on a place, I look for Facebook and Telegram groups where I can learn about the place, where I have locals involved. There are often some guides or organized meetups. I look for co-working spaces where I can go, or also I really like this platform. It's called Work From, and they always feature different. They feature cafes where you can work from. So when I used to be in Vienna for a while, I always just went to different cafes to work from there. So it's cheaper than a co-working space, and you always get to meet other people who are also working from there. So something I can recommend if you're at a place. And then some examples where this integration has been working really well. There's one that I know of is Casa Natural, is here in Italy, in Matera, which is in the south of Italy. Matera used to be a very poor town here in Italy, where people basically used to live in caves until the 60s or so. And then they started renovating the whole town, and it became one of the like EU cultural how do you say culture capital in 2017 or 19, and then it really like became a hype. And this Casa Natural, they are a co-working space who are really integrated in this in the local community, and they have the community school of knowledge where they are teaching to visitors about the local culture and local arts. And they are now leading different projects here in Italy where they where it's about sharing the Italian culture, and really, yeah, has this education aspect that we talked about. So this is they're really inspiring. Really love this project. Yeah, well, before we move into co-living, maybe I want to ask a question again. What's your opinion? What do you think about these example and this way of travel? Have you ever done anything like that, like being part of working in an NGO that is locally involved, or can you imagine doing that whilst working remotely? You can just write in the chat, or also just unmute yourself if you want to share something or any thoughts too.
Hey, me again. I haven't tried yet that much, because I always feel like that there is not enough time. The time that you arrive, you settle down, you discover the place, you make your research. It always seems a bit tight to except if you come back to the same place regularly, but probably with the right resources, it's easier. Here in Montenegro, I've been here for about 10 days, and we're trying. It's not like a social impact project too much, but like it's a very simple thing that we are doing. I'm part of a Wi-Fi tribe chapter, so we are 20 of us traveling.
Oh.
And we're doing between us, we were doing like Spanish exchange just to like practice our second language, and like we have some natives with us. And so we got this idea to like just open it to locals. So we've had locals coming and just chatting with us, teaching us things in Montenegrin, and also like we were just like trying to speak Spanish all together, which is leading to more like potential like just project or drinks, just like meeting, just being a bit more in the community. But definitely I would be interested to have the right resources, or maybe try just once to be with an NGO, to like prove myself that it's not that hard.
Yeah, and I feel like if we are in our hometowns or where we're already connected, we often do maybe charity work, or we are involved in different maybe impact projects. But if you're traveling, it's harder to make these connections yourself. So I think it's a really good way to be slow traveling and at the same time look for organizations who already have these bonds but are also connected to the digital community, so that you can, let's say, easily get involved without needing to become a member and do all the organization about joining like an organization or an NGO. So that's why I thought these options would be really interesting to share.
Someone shared here in the chat, Ana Maria from Colombia, Bogota. She said that she finds it challenging to find places to work, like you were mentioning, Anja, laptop-friendly cafes or places like that. Even in Bogota, which is the city she lives, she finds it's hard to find this kind of places. And yeah, I do agree that some cities, even in Bucharest, you do have some certain hubs where you can go and work. Some cafes that are like laptop friendly, they have a lot of sockets, and the atmosphere is in general pleasant. But yeah, I think it isn't like, I think it mostly depends on not on us, because I think my idea on this is to actually join communities, because if you join a well-established community, they already know the places. So I don't know, maybe you have other advices, Anja. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the city. I used to be in cities where I also had the feeling like it wasn't, they didn't like to see it. And then if I'm in Berlin, it's just so normal. I also heard of cafes where they now, like like I was in Paris, for instance, and they charge you 10 euros. So you can sit there with your laptop and you also get a coffee for free or something. I think it's totally fair. But yeah, joining a community or looking for a co-working space, I think it would be one of the other options, maybe if the cafe culture is not so open yet. Yeah. And if I'm staying in co-livings, usually they have a co-working space or the common space that we use for working as well. So that usually works quite well. Yeah, any other comments or things you like to share or questions to that? And then we go. Oh yeah, one of my favorite topics to talk about is the co-living, because yeah, this is my interpretation of co-living. So I see it as a value-driven new work concept that encourages sustainable living and supports local economies. So by definition, co-living is a concept of intentionally sharing a home by non-related individuals. So I think it's like 3 or more people who ideally share the same values and interests, where as a result, we have an active community. So you probably all know like student housing and flat shares. So a co-living is something different. It's people living together by choice. That's one of the points. So that's what it's meant with intentional. And ideally, by living together for a longer time, it results in this strong and supportive environment that we can see. So it's not just due to budget reasons, for example, that people share spaces, but it's because they believe in community living. And of course, this is a bit idealistic. There are also others, but the co-livings that I know that work really, really well is where you really have this intentional community of people living together. So usually there's private spaces like the bedrooms, and then there's common spaces like a common kitchen and a common workspace or a living room that people share. Sorry. So yeah, so that's co-living. And before I dive more deeper into the topic, also again, I would like to know if you have any experiences with co-living. How do you feel about it? Does it sound interesting? Just from this first little introduction, or also any concerns, questions?
Again, I don't see any hand raised here, but I do. Oh, someone dropped in the chat a message. I currently live in a van. That's so cool. I would like to co-living in like a community of vans. That's so cool, Ellen. I've been co-living with, I don't know, friends or other people for some time now, and it wasn't in the context of remote work. So I started to live with some friends. We shared some values 6 years ago, and then I moved with my boyfriend. But for 2 years, I co-lived with people that I chose to live. So they weren't like family; they were friends that became family. It was really an interesting experience because different characters. You have to actually learn how to accept both to put your boundaries, also accept other people boundaries. It's a lot of it's a growth opportunity there to co-live with other people, because when you were living with your parents or your family, it was not of your choice, but now you're choosing to stay with people that maybe you share the same values, the same hobbies or stuff. It's interesting. So it wasn't in the context of remote work, but yeah, I only experienced it for 1 week, so I can't really say I'm an expert in that area, but it was really interesting to co-live with people that I work with in another country for the first time. So yeah. And we have some comments here. So Gina says she shares her home in Mexico. I don't advertise, and somehow women traveling alone have found us. It's a very good experience, she says. Speaking of women traveling, I would like to maybe a little bit to talk about people that travel alone, especially females, and how solo travelers, especially females, because maybe we're more vulnerable to, I don't know, violence or threats. I would like to, if you have any suggestions for women that travel alone, yeah, I would love to dive a bit into that.
I've been to many co-livings in Europe, and I've worked in one, and I can only say that if you haven't tried it, it's life-changing. It's really nice. Go try it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Anya.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to come in and say I'd love to comment more on all the things that you're saying, but I unfortunately live in one place with one employer in London, and I'm very interested in finding a role elsewhere. So I've not had much experience that. In terms of traveling alone, though, I do that quite a lot, and I do find that there is so much community online that you can reach out to in advance of going anywhere, even if it's just for travel and not for work. I'm sure the same applies for work. But you know, if I'm particularly worried, I know I did Costa Rica entirely by myself, and I hadn't booked anything. I just worked it out as I went, used all of the apps. You know, like there's so many opportunities. And I'm interested in the co-living space piece, and to sort of know a little bit, what do they tend to be like? Is it kind of like a B&B where everyone has their own sort of bedroom and possibly en suite, or is it more like you know, I don't know, like dorms, that sort of thing? I'm sure there's both, but like, what's the general experience?
Yeah, I can share, but also John, you have some experience as well. Do you want to share yours?
Yeah, I can. They are most of the time, at least what I try to call authentic co-livings in Europe, at least, which are the ones that are usually independently owned, that are not part of like big corporation that do more like co-housing and not co-living. Usually, it everyone has their own bedrooms and shared common spaces, kitchen, living room, outdoor spaces, whichever. Sometimes it's like small apartments. Sometimes you have a shared like with 2 or 3 beds for more affordable options. I believe that most co-livings offer both options. Some don't have shared rooms or dorms, but yeah, it's mostly, it won't have it's like kind of a big, like if you would live with roommates that you didn't know the week before, but that all have values that make it work way better than in a hostel, for example. And you also know that people stay longer, so community building is easier. At least that. And what is great about it looks like that. And also, like, you need a co-working space and a good Wi-Fi. That's like kind of the the basic thing for a co-living, right? Yeah, that's about it, I guess. And I feel like the co-living industry, as opposed to hotels, Airbnb, hostels, and everything, it's all about cooperation and not competition in between co-livings. You'll find that in Europe and in the world, is a lot of like everyone knows each other, and it's a very small world in the best way.
Yeah, I can 100% underline everything you say. I have one slide. I think this is so I call it impact co-living, or what you said, authentic co-living. So it's one of the aspects is like the responsible use of resources. So I believe not everyone needs to own like a huge house and lots of rooms and all the things that we use in our daily lives. We can just share them. It's also about co-creation and collaboration. So if you are amongst, let's say, like-minded people or people who share the same values, then automatically it's a lot of things come up, like in this co-creation sense, just by working together. So it's more than just co-work. Even in co-working, it's already collaborations, like start to emerge, or you ask someone for a question, you have a challenge, and in the co-living, this is even brought to a next level because it goes beyond this professional environment, but also you get to share your habits, or like, yeah, it's just about personal and professional growth. I see that a lot. And then something that we particularly look at in the co-living that we are building is this regenerative living concept. So we try to be super sustainable, and build this whole concept around it, of being connected in nature, which, yeah, we are placed in the countryside in the nature, so we measure our impact, and we also like to use this co-living as to promote a regenerative lifestyle to people who visit us. But of course, there's different formats and forms of co-living. So I think it's important to like ask yourself, what are you looking for? What aspects are important for you? This is one other example, or these two co-livings that I've stayed at, which I really liked. And this is maybe your question, like how do you find the right place if you're looking to explore co-living and you don't know where to start or what to look for? Something I can recommend is to, well, check the location. Should it be in the city or in the countryside? What country do you want to go to, obviously? And then also look, is there, like, how does the community look like? What are the people interested in? Is there community facilitation? So some sort of organization around the co-living, like typically there's a weekly plan of activities that can be done. Then there's shared dinners or something like this. So any type of activities, or also, yeah, you can look for references. How do people like it? What does a typical day in the co-living look like, to give you an impression of what to expect. And then, so that's kind of the community side, the location side, and then the practical point of view, like how much does it cost, what's included, how do you get around, and all of these things are usually also described quite well, and should be important. And the Wi-Fi I would put in this point as well. And there's different platforms like coliving.com, this new app MapMelon that I really like, where you can look for co-livings and you can also connect to fellow travelers. And some others who list all the co-livings, so you can go on there, search for the co-livings, or also, again, Facebook groups, Telegram groups, where you can ask or check with other travelers. But it basically depends on what you're looking for. One tip that I would always give is to check that there's someone, like community facilitation wise, who's organizing the whole co-living, because I also found a few spaces who call themselves co-living, but they're actually basically just hotels where you can rent a room and that's it. And this is not what I would consider a co-living in the sense that we understand it. So and then there's also other options like eco-villages or farm stays, where you have communities where you can also work from. So this is me staying in an eco-village. But one thing to be aware of is obviously verify that there's the infrastructure in place, and that they actually have a workspace and good Wi-Fi and so on. So for co-living, typically, because it is designed for nomads, these things are in place. For if you stay in some sort of alternative community, then this is one thing to be aware of. But I think they also have a lot of positive aspects as well. That's my looking at the time. I think we need to jump to
but we have 2 questions in the chat after you.
Okay.
Finish. Yep. Jen asked which eco village did you go to? Which eco village did you go to? I'm actually very interested in the answer, because
I stayed in, it's called Alpe Pianello. It's in the, I can write it in the chat as well. It's in the Piedmont area, so in the Alps. They're very spiritual, so it's a very special place, but definitely check it out. Working from there was okay, but it's not designed for nomads, as I said. So I was basically the only one sitting there with my laptop. But I loved staying there. But there's lots of eco villages. There's also a website, like a platform, ecovillage.com, I think, or .org, that you can check. Okay. Did we have any other questions
I think
or comments?
and Jian answered, but if you want to add something to this, she asked if do you often find new business in co-living? She was referring to the fact that because you are talking about collaboration, can you find like opportunities while meeting other people
Yeah.
in a co-living space?
That's a good one. I think, yes, definitely the answer is yes. Obviously depends a little bit on the people who are there and what you do. But I find this collaboration aspect has basically always come up. So there's always some way that we can benefit from another. And if you're open-minded to that, generally people who stay in co-livings, they're often freelancers or business owners or people who have certain skills and like to share them. So definitely good opportunity for collaboration. Plus, something I can also recommend is maybe look for specific programs. So something like I don't know, entrepreneurial week, for example, or where that could be even more targeted to the business that you're working in. So those also happen. And that could be quite helpful as well.
Nothing else in the chat. So if you want to wrap up.
Yeah. So that's my information. So you can follow me, and any feedback is very much appreciated. Thank you so much, Andrea, for inviting me to share with you guys. And also thank you for sharing your experiences and questions and everything. I love to be in exchange. And if anything, just drop me a DM or like connect on LinkedIn. I would be super happy about that. And thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you everyone for sharing the space with us. And I hope we can see you at our next masterclass, maybe. But it was really nice to share the space with you all, and this the diversity, everything we share here. It was a really nice experience. I'm gonna drop again the links for Anja, so you can connect with her on LinkedIn. Also check her co-living. So yeah, I hope you have a lovely morning, evening, night. And maybe at some point we can like meet in real life at some point in this life. That would be really nice. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.